Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Words Matter series from ishield.ai. Every month, we invite an industry leader to talk about unconscious bias in communications and how companies can tackle these biases to create a more inclusive workspace for everybody. Quick introduction to ishield.ai. ishield.ai is an AI assistive technology that helps companies create bias-free communications across the talent lifecycle. Today, we are going to talk about challenges people face in using pronouns at work. One day, a classmate called me out of the blue, and upon learning what I do at iShield, he asked me, what is this he, him, they, them really mean? And I was surprised because, he was a business leader in a Fortune 500 company, lived in the US. So I assumed that he would know, but he didn't. And that actually led me to question what is the level of awareness and around this around use of pronouns. And that also led into us doing a survey, a global survey of people, and understand the challenges they face in using pronouns at work. So today we are going to also launch this survey report. But to talk more about using pronouns at work, we have Dr. Yetta Toliver. Yetta joined Xerox Corporation in 1987 and has held multiple management and director positions. She's now the global head of diversity, inclusion, and belonging. In her role, she leads the DIB strategy and roadmap to help Xerox drive change and build a more diverse community within the company and the communities they serve. She is a servant leader at heart. In 2013, she established the Journey of Leadership Institute, which is a leadership program that empowers individuals to advance in leading themselves, others, and the organization. Let's get ready to learn. Please help me welcome Yetta Toliver. Welcome to the show, Yetta.
Thank you so much, Keshavan, for this opportunity to create awareness about the proper use of pronouns. I use she, her pronouns.
Fantastic. I also just learned that you completed 35 years at Xerox, so congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's been a very outstanding, exciting, and diverse journey in my career with Xerox.
Awesome. I will jump right into the topic. I want to understand a little bit more. Who are we talking about when we discuss pronouns at work?
When we talk about pronouns at work, Keshavan, we're talking about humankind. It's about all of us. We're talking about how to use pronouns for building gender inclusion. It is more specific about the inclusion of people who are non binary. But, however, with the interactions that we have today going more globally, be it through our email communication, our voice communication, our video communications, we're starting to see the need for proper genders to be identified. Because we can no longer easily identify genders by name. So understanding an individual's preferred pronoun may eliminate misgendering that person. So it's truly about building gender inclusion.
Thank you for that. I want to understand a little bit more about what are the challenges that non-binary people face at work.
Hmm. Well, I can tell you it can become a part of issues when we talk about discrimination, but it's about acceptance. It's about providing psychological safety for the individuals. Eliminating microaggressions that may occur. And it also is challenges around the inability for the individuals, especially in the non-binary community, to limit them from being their authentic selves. Those challenges really impact the individual's ability to perform, which employers would definitely want their employees to be able to perform. And it can ultimately cause them to become disengaged and then lose that retained the retention of that employee. So those challenges, we really want to ensure that we are looking at opportunities to remove those challenges or barriers.
Thank you. So, making it more contextual towards how Xerox is spreading awareness, I would love to understand how did you go about it in spreading awareness about inclusion of non-binary genders at work at Xerox.
Something you said earlier in the introduction really resonated with me as bring this question forward. It is about the talent life cycle of an individual, and that's what we've done at Xerox. From the pre-employment experience, we start engaging at point of application. An applicant can self-identify, and upon hiring, we will continue to nurture that relationship, giving our employees an opportunity to go into, as an applicant, we can go in through our system we use to track our applicants through the recruiting process and the experience of going through their hiring interviews, so they can self-identify and ensure that we're creating that awareness about what their preferred pronoun uses are. And we're educating our hiring managers, our recruiters, ensuring that that individual has that safe space. We even afford an opportunity for applicants who want to meet with Xerox employees, who want to better understand accepting of our culture. Is it, or do we really walk the talk, right? When we talk about this, if you read our diversity, inclusion, and belonging page. So, or do they really mean that? So they can have one-on-one conversations with employees. And many of our employees who are engaged in that particular program are members of our employee resource groups, who are member of and one of our employee resource groups that focuses on the LGBTQ plus community, Galaxy, so they can have those real conversations to understand, are we creating awareness? What are we doing? Then also what we do in post-employment, where we have an opportunity for employees to continue to keep their records update in their communication in which they are a part of, understanding how important it is for us to include our employees in the non-binary community, how important it is for us to be able to have those conversations. So Galaxy, our employee resource group that focuses on our LGBTQ plus community, they're the advocates. They are the members of the community. They are the allies. They help to create that awareness. They put on videos to show the proper use of pronouns, to be able to understand how they're able to utilize that information in the environment of work and in their own community. Then they leverage resources from organizations such as Out and Equal. We have a strong 20-year almost relationship with Out and Equal, and getting content from that organization to help us to utilize their resources, guest speakers to help with programming to create that awareness that we open up not just to the members of those of the Galaxy Employee Resource Group, but to all of our employees. Human rights campaign. We have participated in the corporate equity index and received 100% scoring 20 years in a row. They provide us with resources, a toolkit. They have excellent resources to help create the awareness. And then finally, we utilize I4CP as another organization that gives us a wealth of resources. So where we need to ensure we're creating this awareness and we need help in being communicating, be it to have someone to come in that's an expert in that field, we are leveraging all of those resources to help us.
Fantastic work. We will go into a little bit deeper around how you have created this across the talent life cycle, each aspect of it. So we'll talk about it. But I want to also touch upon why do employees need to care about pronouns? Because one of the things that we found in our research was almost 50% of the people whom we interviewed were not even aware of what pronouns signify. And this was a significantly lower number, almost 21%, when we interviewed people in countries like India, right? So I wanted to understand, why do employees need to care about pronouns? Uh, uh, Please go ahead.
Oh, definitely. So, here's one of the things I say when I talk internally to our employees about the our diversity, inclusion, and belonging roadmap, providing them updates, speaking on why this is such important work for Xerox in this space. And then when I speak externally, and oh, by the way, Xerox has been in the diversity and inclusion space for nearly 50 years. So we're no stranger here. But yet, after the killing of George Floyd, we too had to do some reengineering and focusing and elevate, if you will, and amplify in some spaces. So I say that to say, one of the things I talk about, how important it is for diversity matters. We know to have the representation of everyone will help us to be the business case has proven itself, though the companies that are more diverse or perform well. But when we talk about inclusion bonds us is what is a part of my platform and what I share. And when the question is asked, why is it important for us to talk about, the pronouns and ensuring, why should it matter to every employee? Because we're creating a culture of inclusion. And in order for us to bond, we have to ensure that we have that level of respect and understanding of how we want to communicate and relate to each other. And in order for us to do so, that's why we need to make sure we understand how the importance of pronouns and what it plays in our day-to-day and conversation and connection and connectivity with each other. So that inclusion and creating that culture of inclusion bonds us. We have a theme this year around inclusion, and it is creating harmony in the workplace, how important every single individual plays, and that it's just like musical notes, coming together creates this melody. And that's why we want to make sure understanding pronouns, how important it is. And we started that campaign effort in 2020 and bringing some things forward. So to me, that's what it means. And then if I just continue out on that thought, as I talked about diversity matters and how important it is for inclusion to bond us, and that's where that role of pronouns play for us. It gets us to where we want to be at Xerox, and that's belonging sustains us. So we have employees that know they're treated they're treated well, they're respected, they're valued, they're heard. And that's a part of demonstrating that. That's why every employee should care about pronouns, because that's respecting your fellow colleague. And that will help them to know that they belong, they feel valued. So that will help us when we talk about sustaining. So that's the way I see it. That's the way it works at Xerox for us.
And I read a quote that said that using the correct pronoun is an easy way to show respect. So I like that phrase a lot. I want one of the other surprising things that came up in our survey is almost 64% of people whom we surveyed were unlikely to discuss their pronouns at workplace. And I felt that is a significantly high number of people who were reluctant to actually talk about it. So I wanted to understand how Xerox is trying to create a safe place for employees so they could talk about their pronouns. And I also want you to touch upon the aspect of the optionality around disclosing your pronouns. Please go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And when I went through and looked at, you gave me an opportunity to peek at the survey results, and that 64% unlikely response rate really intrigued me as well. And that's a part of a piece of what we do at Xerox. We ensure that we educate our employees and create this sense of awareness. So it was great to come on to the programming today to talk about that. But I'm going to start with your last piece around what we've done at Xerox. When I talked about the talent life cycle of what we do to from our applicants' perspective, to be able to self-identify, to our onboarding process and being an employee, they can also self-identify. And even when it comes to the use of pronouns, our topic at hand, voluntary is our option. We want to make sure it is voluntary, just as we are creating a safe space for our non-binary community to be able to identify their preferred pronouns. We want to make sure every individual at Xerox feels safe in what they do. The spectrum of gender identity can have little risk, but you can make it very risky when you start enforcing it upon individuals. So to make it a safe or environment for everyone, we chose the option of a voluntary. So what we have done though, to make sure that we're making it clear about the use of pronouns and identifying. I love the piece that came out for our email portion when we went through the exercise to understand what do we need to do to include our pronouns in our emails exchanges. And me and along with a colleague that is responsible for our policies, we wanted to make sure we did our research and we presented it to our CHRO. There was very low risk in doing so, again, keeping it voluntary. The content that came out of our brand organization was very impressive. The first why that they put on and explaining to employees on how to use the pronouns in our emails was to identify it creates a culture of inclusion. That's the very first why it's important for pronouns. I love that. And it also got into talking about how it is recognizing gender identity to continue to have this safe space and how we're normalizing things when it comes to how pronouns can help normalize and in a very impactful way for those individuals in the non-binary space. Then the last point that they made, we want to be clear in our communication about pronouns and being able to identify and understand who we're addressing and avoiding misgendering. So it kind of gave that ownership to the employee to say, yeah, here is what we're about. We're aligning to this diversity inclusion roadmap. We say we want to be inclusive. This is the way to get there. So that's the communication that went out. We also, since then, this year, we have enabled now for pronouns to be on badges. So we were excited about that piece as well. So you have the option now if you want to have it as we're going back into the office. So we wanted to go ahead and do that. And our head of corporate security had no issues in including that to make that happen. So we put that as well. But the piece that impresses me the most, we lead by example. And to see our senior leaders, the C-suite officers, when I look at that, their email, and they are carrying the pronouns in their email, that speaks volumes for us because they did it on their own to be able to say they wanted to represent as well. And without any prodding, no, I did not. And ask that we set the example. They're doing it on their own. So to me, that's a part of it as well, is to be able to lead by examples and have those leaders to be able to do it. Now, we're hoping to see when you're able to do your survey the next time to see globally if we're able to make the transition and be able to take that number and start reducing it. But for right now, it is a little bit of alarming to see because we've been in this pronoun space for a few years, but it's still not taking off to the level of acceptance that we would want it to be. So that's probably why we're having this conversation today, Siobhan, to create this awareness and why it's so important.
Yeah. I do want to inform the audience that we will be sharing a link to our global survey very soon on while this conversation is going on. You can click on the link and download the report. And also reach out to us if you want to ask any clarifying questions. I want to, the other aspect that came out prominently was almost 60% people when they enter a meeting and they are talking to somebody, they assume their gender based on commonly known gender markers, like how a name is spelled, does it end in a vowel? So that, I think, for a global organization like Xerox, I don't know if I can really guess the gender of a person by the gender markers that I know. I want to understand a little bit around if I'm getting into a meeting, for example, what's the more safe way and how do I introduce my pronouns in a meeting? Are there
Well,
any best practices that worked at Xerox?
there are some best practices that definitely work. The facilitator and the presenter of the meeting set the standard. One of the things, one of the colleagues that is the leader of our LGBTQ plus employee resource group we call Galaxy Pride at Work, helps me, keeps me straight. Ryan Crozier and I make sure we're intentional. Again, this is going back leading by example. So facilitator presenters are meeting common opening, very natural should be. My name is Dr. Yetta Toliver. I use she, her pronouns. That's a part of it. Also, presenting it out on your title slide when you're getting ready to present. So it's a part of your name that shows, just like we're airing here now. It should be present there so it can be seen, and that becomes a way from a written perspective to be able to share out your pronouns. So I believe that becomes a way of, especially since we've been meeting more virtually than in person, that's the way to do it. Now, recently we've been on a tour. Ryan and I had an opportunity to be at a conference for Out an Equal Workplace Summit. It was a consistent practice. Every individual that came up, presenter and speaker, did that. Commonly, that's getting into the practice. This is just one of those things with practice, you become familiar with. Everyone gets used to when you go around the table to introduce yourself, or you're getting ready to present, you introduce yourself, you're just adding 2 seconds more to your introduction, and that is saying what your pronouns are that you use. So that's kind of helped to be a part of what has helped us to move forward. There are times, though, I'll be honest, you get into reoccurring meetings and you'll get out of the practice, if you will, because that is a safe community. For example, when we meet globally as employee resource groups leaders, we will not do our pronoun introductions because we pretty much at that point have learned it. But in the first introductions, it is really prudent at that time to be able to share out what your pronouns are in those initial introductions.
Fantastic. Even after that, sometimes it happens that you can get the pronouns wrong. And when somebody gets the pronoun wrong, what is the way to correct that? And what are some of the best practices again that worked at Xerox? How are you training your people to bring about this a proper way to correct?
Yes. The first thing is not make a scene. If someone has misused your pronouns or misgendered you, is to be able to do that gentle correction. Making sure you offer, if you are the person that has misgendered, and it has happened to me, the voice of an individual has sounded more of a particular gender marker than what I assumed. And so, apologies should be brief, as to say, I do apologize, and then and just be mindful moving forward. And that's what's important. Be mindful moving forward. So that way you're not making a lengthy conversation out of it to cause any type of further delay or prolonging of it, just making sure that you are able to move forward. And, sometimes it's just a matter of being educated. And one of the things we kind of did in the video I mentioned, we launched a video last year, members of our employee resource groups for Galaxy really set the stage for talking about how important it is. And they talked about this very conversation that if you misgender someone, what is the correct way to kind of go through and to be able to identify it. What we have zero tolerance for, though, at Xerox is someone to cause microaggressions and refusing to, if someone has identified what their correct pronouns are. We take those matters seriously, and we want to make sure that if anyone has been, or they're not correctly aligning with that individual's correct pronoun, is that we want to make sure that that is addressed. And in some cases, it's just a matter of having those conversations, and it's autocorrect, if you will, moving forward. So that's kind of how you have to make sure we deal with it. But the first thing I would say is to not make a scene about it. Gently do a gentle correction and make sure moving forward you have created that awareness.
Fantastic. And at the same time, is there a best practices for how do you ask for help when you do not know a person's pronoun?
Yes.
Uh,
And we have, again, a great resource. Our employee resource groups has definitely for Galaxy. This is one of their sweet spots. They're very open. I know Ryan and his other colleague, that's the service co-president, Michelle Waits. They're very open to having the conversation as the leaders of the employee resource group for Galaxy. Then for me, I've had conversations as well. Managers who are trying to figure out how to have the conversations, for employees who want to now share their pronouns and how do they do it in a safe space. So that's one of the things I believe, especially any of my colleagues that may be listening in the role. That's kind of what we should be providing in a diversity, equity, and inclusion office space, to give the resources to the employees, to give them the managers the resources that they need, giving them that information and being there to be that support system would be very helpful. And what our HR operations will do if someone writes in a question and they want to make sure that it's anonymous and they're seeking help, we respond to those too, because we have content, again, using the resources between Out and Equal, Human Rights Campaign, I4CP. We have lots of easy read collaterals. We even have a 100-page toolkit from the Human Rights Campaign if you want to go through everything when it comes to gender identity that you would want to know. And that's kind of what we do. And again, like the resource I shared earlier about the email use, it defines what the why in to give them the understanding. And that as well is a resource to help out. So that's kind of what we do to make sure everyone knows how to use it. We make sure we prepare them with the information through resource guides or having those conversations.
Yeah. One of the other things that came up in the research was almost 88% of people said that they will ask a friend or a colleague, right? Or they will go do a Google search. So by making it available in, like how you said, in email signatures or these resources, I hope that people have this one resource where it also ensures consistency, and there is a place to go when you have a question, right? I want to talk a little bit about good use of technology and how did that help how did that help Xerox? So can you talk a little bit about some of the best practices at Xerox in terms of how you've used the power of technology to get to spread the awareness around pronouns?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to one that has been a reoccurring theme, is from an Outlook perspective and utilizing the email signature. That really helped us. And again, that just created some excitement within the organization, excitement within me as the diversity, inclusion, and belonging leader to see the use of pronouns to appear in our Outlook messages. LinkedIn helps a lot. I am one. You go check my LinkedIn profile, you'll see my preferred pronouns there. I love the ease of use of that. Then when we use having conversations, sometimes we do have conversations that are external where they'll use Zoom. We're team users. We try to limit where we're using other video conferencing tools. But if we have a video conferencing tool that allow us to put in, again, like the one we're using today, our pronouns, and that's what we want to do. And we want to make sure we're carrying there as well. So that's where we are leveraging technology to help us from a pronoun perspective. I would love it personally if our teams did, much like a Zoom or LinkedIn, be able to see our profiles and know what our preferred pronouns are there. I think there is opportunity inside of technology. So to me, something you just said, Keshavan, is consistency, because that's what's going to make sure we start really creating more awareness when it's consistent. Leveraging technology, I think, will be a tool to enable that, as well as we as users. We need to make sure we're practicing it, and practicing it from an audible and from a written perspective in our communication, but also consistently when we're using technology. For example, I was on board with it in our Outlook profile, but then when it came to LinkedIn, I had to take a moment and go over and see, how can I include it in LinkedIn? So when you're starting to set up your preferred pronouns, be consistent across technology, as well as practicing it in your conversations as well. So to me, that becomes a part of that best practices. But technology, we have a little bit more room to help us to do better. As we say, what are our opportunities? We call those moments to do better.
Great. If audience listening in, if you have any questions, please post them. Um, I want to also share with you what we found in terms of using technology in our research. So we are developing a feature where uh, as you type a message in Microsoft Teams or on Slack and you're addressing a person, then you also can get a real-time, in-the-moment prompt on the pronouns set by the individual. So this way, if you have an opportunity to get it right every single time. So when we talked about this feature to people and we wanted to identify what were their concerns if they were to use an assistive technology like this, and they brought up questions around privacy. That is the prompt only visible to the individual? So that was one of the requests. The other thing was how real time it is.
Mhm.
So that came up. And the third thing, which is probably the most challenging thing around a pronoun, is how complete is the solution. So some of the feedback we received was the terminology and the vocabulary is still developing. Right? For example, uncle or aunt. We still, I think that there is still a lot of room for how do you use pronouns across all the all communication. So there is a real challenge there. Um, so and That's also one of the barriers I have. Completeness, for example, I have realized is also one of the barriers that some people said, we need to cross before they could take assistance. But I must also say that almost 77% people said that they will be happy taking help from a bot.
Mhm.
So we have said, okay, we will go ahead and we will build that feature out. Hopefully, we will release that for all the Microsoft Teams and Slack users. So you do get a prompt if somebody sets their pronoun, you know what pronoun to use with a real-time nudge or a feedback. I did want to share that one aspect as well.
If I can build on that one, Keshavan, I think would be a great at leveraging technology to help us. I think is always a good thing, and where we can leverage bots to be able to make us more effective in our communication will also speed up our learning as well, and creating that awareness, and will also prevent those moments where we could get into misgendering. So I'm excited to hear you saying, taking that research and coming up with that solution through the use of bots. I think will be a very helpful tool, especially in this space. Because again, we want to drive that number down from where it was unlikely to become more likely that they're using this type of technology when it comes to proper use of pronouns in our workspace and everyday space, because that's what we should be doing when it comes to the proper use of pronouns. And that type of technology can help us to become more smarter and more understanding and embracive of this opportunity.
Awesome. I have one last question to understand a little bit more about the ERG at Xerox, and how do they work, and how do they influence across the organization.
Okay. Well, could almost go into a whole different podcast when you start getting me to talk about our employee resource groups at Xerox. So I will start with a little reflection historically on the employee resource groups at Xerox. They started in the late 60s at Xerox, and Harvard Business Review has written a case study about us many, many years ago, giving Xerox the nod for starting employee resource groups. It started as a collective voice for the African American employees in the US at the time of the late 60s, civil rights movement, another period in our society of social unrest. And it was a point in time where Xerox was employing and bringing into the company African American talent, but they were not progressing and moving up and advancing in the workplace. They came together collectively with their united voices to make policy changes. And that's the difference in understanding perpetuity of employee resource groups, is where you make an impact to policy changes. They were the first group, as Harvard Business Review has given Xerox credit, to start the employee resource groups. We evolved from the late 60s, early 70s to continue creating spaces for employees of various communities. Around the late 60s, when we were working and focusing on advancing the needs of African Americans at Xerox, our Asian community as well was collectively coming together. They were formed as well in the late 60s, and then later chartered in the 80s to be an employee resource groups. Now, then they were called caucus groups. Today, we call them employee resource groups, business groups, employee networks, various names, but all that collective of community coming together. We also evolved to have our Women's Alliance representing all women's employee resource groups in the late 80s. Today, they're in 27 countries. We also started at that time Galaxy, our community supporting our LGBTQ plus. They came about in making changes for our LGBTQ plus community. Let's talk about a moment in this space of making a difference in policy changes. That group formed the voice to ensure in the late 80s the importance about the healthcare needs of domestic partners. By 1992, Xerox had already included in our benefits policies coverage for domestic life partners in 92. There's also provisions for gender care, as we did with anyone in the community is going through their gender transformation, and transgender care is included and extended to the benefits of their family unit. This was all done prior to where we are today in our society. The human rights campaign efforts, the statements that are being made, Xerox is very open in putting those statements out publicly. We continue to evolve with our Black Women's Leadership Council, being a part of the understanding. If anyone's familiar with the McKinsey and the Workplace Study, African American females are still underrepresented in leadership positions. That group was formed because in the 80s, that need was being addressed, and it's still being addressed today. So that group was formed in order to address that need. And today, to give you an example how powerful our employee resource groups are, the Black Women's Leadership Council is one of the organizations that has a foundation. They have given out under 150,000 scholarships to African American high school female students to ensure that they had a pathway to success for higher education. That's what our employee resource groups do. Then we talk about our Hispanics coming together, called HOPA, for professional advancement. They too now have a foundation, but they are focusing on what is important for them in the community in which they serve, advancing the needs of our Hispanic group. And they have expanded to go globally as well, continue to understand and need what they should do in serving the community as well. Then we have our young professionals network. They are just amazing at what they do. And recently, as we move toward a net zero by 2040, they came up with an ideation challenge to ensure that we align with our corporate social responsibility needs in this environmental space, what we can do, and created this effort to be able to say, what can we do to create an idea to implement something into our business and make a difference when it comes to net zero. And I can just go on from there, talking about an ERG that we have that is focusing on developing leaders at Xerox. They started in the 70s, the Xerox Leadership Association, and they're continuing to bring programming platforms from stellar leaders in the out that or external speakers to really help amplify what they do in their space. Then we have our veterans coming together. We started that ERG just when COVID hit, supporting our military veterans as well as their spouses. And they're creating a pipeline to bring in veterans into Xerox. We've had people come to Xerox because they saw what our employee resource groups and aligns with their community. We most recently stood up and excited about this one as well, our Enable All organization. This is the first employee resource group that we started outside of the US. Our other 9 employee resource groups started outside of the US, and this one started in our EMEA market. And they are the fastest growing employee resource group we have today. They're focusing on the disabilities that are hidden or visible, and we're just excited about the work that they're doing. And they're also leaning in to see what we can do as a company to ensure our products, even though we have always had a way to ensure that our products are accessible, but they're doing an extra effort in ensuring that our products go to market or accessible for the communities. And we're also creating a pipeline for bringing in those individuals with hidden and physical disabilities. Love the stories in which they share. Again, I can go on and on talking about the value that our employee resource groups bring in all that they do, all 10 of them working together, again, starting with the oldest one known, the National Black Employees Association, all the way to our newest one that has started, Enable All. Just excited about all the work that they do. They all have a very strong global representation. It is just one of the things that has provided us so much great value at Xerox and what we do. And it's just, I'm excited about all the work that they provide and the retention in which they help with our employee base. We recently did a survey last year to understand the employees that participate in employee resource groups. What does their retention look like? And we found that we had a higher retention among our employees that are engaged in our employee resource groups. So I always tell people I'm a product of an employee resource group. I did a lot of my leadership muscle building, my network extension, my community service work was all in that space of employee resource groups. So this is a little bit about what we do. And I thank you, Keishavon, for allowing me to do a little bit of sharing, just a little bit, about the employee resource groups at Xerox, because we feel like we are definitely trailblazers in this space.
Yeah, I mean that the passion comes out very clearly when you talk about this, and I also love the fact about how it's a global but also a local initiative, considering that Xerox is a global organization. Since we are talking about data, one of the researchers that I read, research reports that I read, said that people check the career website. Almost 81% of people check the career website for their commitment towards diversity and inclusion. They also check for availability of employee resource groups. And these are some of the things that they check before they decide to apply at that organization. That's 81%. That's the latest research that I said, that I read. So that's a significant percentage. So if organizations are building these in the companies, they also need to talk about it in the communications very
And,
clearly.
and that's exactly what we do. I mentioned earlier from pre-employment stage for applicants, and we do allow that opportunity for anyone that's interested in, as they go through the application process and learning more about Xerox, to really understand more about career opportunities, what our culture is like. And when we talk about what our culture is like, our culture ambassadors are employee resource groups. They get the ear of our suite every quarter. They present a business the review. So the what they have an opportunity to do with the C-suite is to be able to tell them exactly what are they doing to perform and create that awareness inside of their organization, what their programming looks like, what they're planning to do in the next quarter, and where they have opportunities. Now, each of our ERGs are aligned to an executive sponsor who's a member of the executive committee, but it's important for them to report out to the CEO. And that is chaired by me, the CEO, and the CHRO. So we sit down and we have a very good engaging conversation. And actually, the last few quarters, we ran over because it's been such great content in what we're sharing. So that allows them to know that what they do matters. And again, they are a part of helping me to drive on my roadmap for diversity, inclusion, and belonging, a culture change. They are the ones that are the pulse of the employees. Our former CEO, who passed away, John Vizzentine, loved the quarterly meeting. He was I was the first, he was the second on the call before the rest of his committee showed up. That is a consistent practice now that we have our new CEO in place. And as Steve joins the call, he is just as excited in hearing the conversation. And he transitioned from being not just an executive sponsor, but now the CEO of a employee resource group. So he understood that relationship and the value in which they bring. So I believe in optimizing what they do and sharing who they are. And again, to your point, I have actually heard the stories and spoke with employees who wanted to become, before they were employees, who were attracted to Xerox because of our rich legacy of employee resource groups. And we're not living on the past. We're progressive and into the future and what we're continuing to do move forward. So they're attracted to us more today as they were based on the work we have done in the past. So it's a little bit of challenging to keep us ahead of our own selves, but that's a part of what we do. Because as I tell this story, if Xerox continued to be a company that produced marks on paper, we wouldn't be who we are today as in this digital space in which we have not only grown in, but continue to thrive. And we're continuing to look to advance on where we want to go next. The innovation that we have built a legacy of over 100 years of a company around is who we're continuing to be for nearly 50 years in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all around our employee resource groups, because they have been around just as long as Xerox's participation in the space of diversity.
Fantastic. I will take you up on the offer of doing another show on specifically on employee resource groups, because I think that there is a lot to cover and also a lot to learn from what Xerox has done. Some of these things, initiatives came into force even before I was born. So that makes me even more excited that, how visionary certain initiatives that you started at Xerox were. So, just to conclude, this conversation, we covered topics around awareness, around using pronouns. We also covered topics around what challenges people face and how to tackle those challenges while we spread the awareness and acceptability of pronouns at work. And we also covered around technology, on how can technology come help in using pronouns at work. In the research report that we just shared the link, we actually go into deeper data in each one of these areas of awareness, challenges people face, and their propensity to use technology to help. I do want to hear feedback from people as they consume this report. I would love to hear from them. Before I end the show, I do want, again, because this is all about data, the survey that we've done, I do want to share one aspect. There is a research that was done by companies like Google and Microsoft around communications. And they said that if the communication represents you or any particular individual, it's personalized, then the brand loyalty goes up by almost 71%. And at the same time, there's another research that said that if it does not represent you, then the drop off is almost 49% immediately. So I think that getting a pronoun right has a direct impact on the brand loyalty. And at the same time, if as a company, if you don't get the pronoun right, then you are also running the risk of the person just dropping off. So I think that is but that I think is a business and an ROI incentive to do this right. But I think the real incentive is it's all about humanity and showing respect for people in getting the pronouns right. Uh, Thank you, Yetta, for sharing your experiences. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I will talk to you soon. Do you have anything to say before we close the show?
I'd just like to again thank you for this opportunity. It has been my absolute pleasure to participate. And one of the things I just would like to add, if I can tie it up between the value of employee resource groups and the use of pronouns, it is because of our Galaxy Employee Resource Group that this became a top agenda for us. And again, as we talked about the proper use of them, the resources needed, that employee resource groups was a part of leading that effort. So that's the employees representing the need of their own community. So to me, that is a very, very valuable resource, if I cannot stress it enough, to lean on and lean in and listen to your employee resource groups. So thank you so much, Kay Siobhan, for that.
Thank you. Thank you.